Hey everybody, thought I'd do another short video on what I've learned using resin for the past few years. I just came up with some more ideas over the last couple weeks. I thought I'd drop you guys all a line. First off, I made myself some notes here, just so bear with me. I want to tell you that for anyone who's using boards, wood panels, obviously it doesn't apply to canvas, but wood panels, if you run your hand across the wood panel, you'll feel that it has a grit. So, based on that, when you're using resin, the chances that you're going to get pits and little hairs and little dimples rises drastically. So you're going to get them when you use resin. So here's something that I thought of, probably maybe not me thought of it, but I've been doing recently and it's helped a lot. Prime your boards. Get a little bit of white house paint, dilute it with water, make it really wet, and paint your boards. And it'll dry in about 5 minutes, and you'll see that the paint makes all the little fibers and hairs rise up from the base of your board. You only need one coat to do this. Once that's done, either grab a sanding block or a sander and sand it down. It doesn't take very long at all. I would recommend 2 different types of sanding. This is an 80 grit block or an 80 grit orbital sander, and then about a 40 grit block just to give it a nice smooth edge. Again, I'm telling you that will help you when it comes time to resin tenfold. It's awesome. The next thing I want to let you know is when you're doing a big piece, so don't worry about the small pieces, but when you're doing a huge piece, don't forget to do the exact same process with your edges. People who are spending a lot of money on pieces want the edges to be just as nice as the painting. So make sure you sand down those edges, you get all the fibers off, everything is clean, and then it's ready for a paint job when you're all done. The next thing I want to let you know is these days, someone sent me a message. These days, a lot of the painting companies and art stores here in Canada are getting rid of dented or irregular or clearance panels. Every art store that I've gone into over the past couple of weeks have shelves and shelves of irregular panels, and they're about half price. So it's a great deal for those of you who work on wood. You have to be careful though. From time to time there is a dent in the wood, or like a fiber of wood had been peeled off, so it leaves a little bit of a trench. So, but don't freak out. Just get some wood filler and fill it in there, sand it all down, and it's a perfectly new board. So take advantage of these sales that are happening at the art stores these days and get those irregular panels. Just be sure to prime them and sand them first before you create your art and top coat with resin. It'll make a huge difference. The next thing I want to let you know, which is something I should have known years ago, I've always been using a torch when I'm doing pieces, whether they be the small 6x6s that I do, or the large 30x30 or 36x36 or 40x40s, or the door size pieces I've used. And it's always been okay, the torch, but I found that for the most part, I'm always left with a final piece that has resin waves, or it's just not consistent. It's not perfectly perfect. There's always something wrong with it. So this week I was doing several pieces and I borrowed a heat gun from work. Let me tell you, this is a game changer. Maybe not when you're doing small pieces. Small pieces, take your torch, it's not going to be a problem. But for large pieces like this guy, and all my 24x24s and 30x30s, this thing, it's never leaving my home again. It doesn't blow the resin around. It doesn't scorch the resin. It keeps it heated, and it keeps an even distribution of heat across your piece. So you never have a spot where you've torched it, and then the spot beside of it hasn't been torched. When you do that, you're going to get an uneven look to it. In the light, when you tilt it, you're going to get an uneven look. This thing, you do your whole piece and the whole piece is perfect. it was quite startling at first. Like, it actually caught me by surprise how perfect it was. Usually I would do 2 to 3 coats of resin for large pieces like that, and I was able to push this one out in 1 coat, which I don't think I've ever done, having a piece come out perfect in 1 coat. But I'm telling you, it was the heat gun. And I've done a few other pieces, and it's like glass. It's perfect finish. So for those of you who are working on, I would say anything over 20 by 20 or 24 by 24, go and get yourself a heat gun. They're between $35 and $75 at your home hardware store in your city, but definitely worth the price. The other thing I'm using my heat gun for, and I've mentioned this in the video before, is for those of you who use tuck tape for the edges, which is my favorite product ever. I've been getting some notes saying that you don't like the stickiness of the tuck tape, and I get it. It's super sticky, but it's the only thing out there that's going to give you the cleanest edges ever. So, like I mentioned before, take your heat gun when you're done your painting, and if you heat up the tape a little bit when you're done, the tape will just peel off way easier than if you don't do that. On that note, once you've pulled off your tape and you do have a sticky residue, again, sand it down. It takes 2 seconds. Just grab your 80 grit sandpaper and sand down your edges, and you'll be fine. For those of you who are doing larger pieces, get this guy, sand your edges down. Don't worry about your resin on the top. If you keep your orbital sander flat against the edge, you're not going to have any damage to the front piece. Once you paint your edges, it's going to cover that scratchy part on your resin, so don't worry about it. But yeah, don't worry about this stuff. The stickiness will go away. There's a few people that like clean edges, non-painted edges. Same thing. Sand down your edges with an orbital sander or with a sanding block and put a layer of polyacrylic. This stuff, polyacrylic, Minwax. It's fairly cheap, inexpensive, about $15 for a thing that'll last for a long time. For those of you who do like painting my edges like myself, white paint, black paint with a top coat of polyacrylic, and you're good to go. What else do I have here? Sound down, yeah, sound down. Oh yeah, the last thing I want to let you guys know about, I don't have any in front of me. Paper towels and resin. Paper towels and resin are not friends. I know you will see a lot of videos online that say you can wipe down your resin pieces afterwards when they're dry with some Windex and paper towel. Please don't do that. Paper towel is actually very coarse, and when you're doing big pieces that are dark, so dark colored pieces, blacks, reds, deep purples, things like that, over time, if you use paper towel, you will see scratch marks or scuff marks from the paper towel. I am not kidding you. In big pieces like this, when I'm doing an art show, people will come and they'll see in the light and they'll say, what is all these scuff marks? And it's because of the paper towel. I've been cleaning with paper towel. So moving forward, I would let you know microfiber cloths are the way to go. They're at the dollar store, they're like $1. So get a handful of them, but only use microfiber on your serious resin pieces. On your small one, if you're just a hobby artist and you're not really selling anything, feel free to use paper towel. On light colored pieces, feel free to use paper towels because you can't see the scuff marks. But on decor pieces, like larger, very fancy pieces that have darker colors, really stick to the microfiber cloths. And that's it. The one last thing, I told you that it was going to be last a second ago, but when you're using your orbital sander on your resin piece between coats, don't be afraid. You don't have to sand with a sanding block, or, you know, you can go full out. You can take this sucker and go to town, which is what I do on these guys. My tip to you is not to go crazy on the edges. So when you're sanding and it's flat, you're going to be tempted to really dig into the edges to create a scuff mark so that the new layer of resin can attach. Go lightly on the edges. I've learned that if you let your sander or the blocks go really deep into your piece, when you pour your next coat of resin, it doesn't clear the scratch marks. For some reason, on the corner, it does a little bit of damage with the scratching. So you'll have a beautiful piece that will have a cloudy ring around, or a square around it, where the scratch marks are. The resin will coat it a little bit, but not entirely. So you'll have this beautiful piece that will be outlined with a very light, cloudy scratch square. It's not cool. So there you have it. If you have any questions, let me know. Hope this was helpful for a bunch of you. Talk to you next time.